Hi there, it's Gabrielle Nicolay from SpeechKids, where we teach little kids to talk and help parents understand their little kids. And today I'm delighted to be talking to Laura Lorenzen. Laura is a an educational advocate and parent coach with District Special Education Partners. Did I get that right?
You did.
Okay. And I'm so delighted that we could make this time, Laura. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be joining you today.
So tell us a little bit more about what that means, an educational advocate and parent coach in the way that you do it.
Absolutely. So just to give you a little background about myself, I worked in schools doing special education for close to 20 years. I started as a social worker and school counselor, and then moved in and to really administrative roles overseeing special education programming. So I was director of student support for many years. I'm also the parent of a now young adult with disabilities, but she began receiving services as a toddler. So we have been through the gamut of special education together, and including really having to fight for services at various points during her life. And so I feel very passionately about supporting families on this journey. And I was really proud of creating a wonderful school program within the school that I worked at. But what I saw was so many other parents struggling and not necessarily having that same level of support. And so a year ago, I decided it was time to launch my own practice. And so I founded District Special Education Partners, really to provide support to families, whether that is support around their child's IEP and working with their school team and trying to build collaborative partnerships with their school, or coaching them around issues that they might be having at home, because parenting a child with special needs can be difficult and parents sometimes need a little bit more support. Yeah. So that's really what I do.
It's so needed. It's so good. I'm so excited. We're going to jump like on one side of that and then we can go to the other side of it too. But one of the things that comes up a lot is, and you have experienced this both as a parent and as an educator and advocate, is there's so much that you don't know when you start.
Yeah.
It's like somebody throws you in the ocean and says, your kid has special needs, figure this out. Can you say a little bit more about like the families that you work with and what's going on and how, tell me the things.
Yeah, I mean, it can be completely overwhelming. And of course, different families come to this with, different experiences and different places that they're at. I know for me as a new parent, it was my first child, turned out to be my only child. I thought I knew a lot about parenting, but I really had no guidepost. I had to figure out on my own that my child was delayed in reaching milestones and figure out how to get her evaluated, and then just coping with all the emotions that come with getting a diagnosis and being told that your child has a disability. And then just trying to figure out, what do I need to do as a parent? And then you're getting all this advice. I had OTs and speech pathologists telling me, do this, do that. And it could feel really, really overwhelming. So, I've had families who've had their 3-year-olds being evaluated. I've worked with high school students. For some parents, it can be a relief to hear, this is what's going on for your child, and here's what we can do to help. For other parents, it can feel really devastating and overwhelming. So I really approach this as figuring out where the parents are at and what do they need.
So sometimes what they need is, what I'm hearing you say, is sort of the hand-holding and the coaching and the emotional support, for sure. What are some of the technical things that parents need to know about sort of the process of special education?
So the process can feel really overwhelming. Here you are as a parent, and suddenly you're being handed all this paperwork by people who are telling you, we want to evaluate your child. Or maybe you're the parent who's requested the evaluation, but you're being asked to sign these consent forms, and you're handed these procedural safeguards that's like 30 pages long and written by lawyers, for lawyers, not for parents. and just trying to figure out all of this. And, some schools do take a very collaborative approach, but not all of them do. For some, the parent walks into a meeting, or in these days, video conferences into a meeting, and there's this educational jargon and acronyms that parents might not be familiar with. So just trying to navigate that landscape, it can feel really overwhelming. And I know for myself as a parent, even after I'd been going to IEP meetings for many years and was a special education expert, it still could feel like a lot to walk into a room full of people sitting around a conference table, all staring at you, ready to tell you what they know about your child. So there's so many, again, different aspects to this, but I think for parents to understand, what are your rights? You are, in fact, a member of the IEP team.
Mhm.
And how do you advocate for those rights? And then trying to figure out, what does my child need? I've got this group of experts telling me that this is the IEP that they've written, but just understanding, is it the right IEP? Do the goals really reflect what their child needs? Are the accommodations inclusive of what the child needs? So there's just so much scope to that. And some parents do a ton of research and become their own self-advocates. And ultimately, that's what I want, is to empower every parent to do that. But there's so much in terms of the process and just understanding the IEP and then understanding their child's needs to build out the IEP that's right for their child. It's a lot.
So you're sort of functioning as a translator in
That's a
some ways.
great way to describe it. I
And
love it. I love it. So translator, intermediary, but also, I can bring that lens of, this is what I see in this evaluation report. This is the data. And I can either say, yes, what the school's proposing actually matches, or, you know what, I see some goals missing, or this accommodation isn't included, and I think your child would really benefit from this. So also translating, and I think bringing that lens of, here's what your child really needs, and being able to push the school to offer what the child needs if they aren't coming to the table with that.
it's so interesting because, again, going back to sort of this notion that you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And so you're in the ocean. Number one, you're emotionally kind of sort of still finding yourself probably at various different, and people handle things differently. And then there's the big knowledge gap. Then professionals are throwing jargon around, which is something I hate. And I have been guilty of in the past, hopefully mostly in the past. And then you don't feel empowered because it can be very sort of that they're the authority and you're not as the parent. But so understanding that what the rights are. And so you started to talk about it a little bit, but like, what are the rights of a parent in the IEP process? Can the parent ask that goals be changed?
Absolutely, absolutely. So parents have rights to request evaluations, and schools have to act on that. And schools have to complete those evaluations within a certain timeline. Now, a lot of that isn't happening because of the pandemic. So sorting all that out is a big question mark for parents right now. Parents absolutely have the right to request certain goals. They have the right to request accommodations and request additional evaluations if they think something is missing. So there's a lot of things that parents can ask for. Schools aren't always going to agree to everything. The parent is one member of the team, but knowing how to advocate and knowing that you do have that voice is really important. I think as a society, we're taught to be very deferential to people who are in authority, and teachers and other members of the IEP team from the school perspective are looked at as authority figures. And in some ways that makes a lot of sense, right? They bring knowledge and expertise to the table, but I want parents to feel empowered that they are also experts in knowing their child. And again, while I look to build those collaborative, positive relationships, I don't want parents to doubt their own expertise or feel like they can't have a voice at the table.
And that's something I find in and I'm not knocking schools, but I do think because of the demand, because of the demands on teachers, because of the number of students, because of the rules and the laws that exist in order to like keep the train roughly on the tracks. Sometimes things get overlooked,
Yeah.
and sometimes educators are just kind of, it's not that they're phoning it in, because they're not, but they're so overwhelmed that they're not seeing what the parent maybe is seeing. And those two perspectives sometimes don't meet. And so what I hear you saying is you're able to sort of bring those two perspectives, educate the parent in terms of what's needed and what's appropriate and what's their rights, but also then educate the school staff and or the officials, the administrative people, to sort of craft a solution that works for the child.
Absolutely. And, you know, I have had the great fortune to work with many amazing teachers and amazing school administrators. So I never want to knock
Mm-mm.
personnel. Teachers have a tremendously difficult job.
Yep.
On the other hand, I do hear from parents who have experienced some horror stories. So I know that that happens as well. I think in many cases that when schools struggle, it's because they just don't always know how to best support students.
Yeah.
And we do ask so much of teachers, and particularly with inclusion and children with disabilities being taught primarily by general education teachers, for them to understand how to best support the child in their classroom
Mhm.
is difficult. Schools don't, you know, and by schools, I mean like graduate programs, things like
Right.
that, don't necessarily train our general education teachers to be great practitioners with their special education students. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
it's a big gap.
Yeah.
And we know that having a quality teacher makes all the difference. So part of my role too, as well, is to just help the teacher to understand what are some of the best practices
Mm.
that are really going to help that child be successful. Sometimes they're simple tweaks. And again, it comes down to teachers not necessarily knowing what they don't know, but when they're shown, hey, if you just do this, it's going to make a world of difference, that can be so eye-opening. So being able to just help the schools as well do a better job in serving their kids, because I really do believe the vast majority of teachers want to
Oh,
really
of
do an
course.
outstanding job for all of the
Absolutely.
children. And they hate it when they don't know how to best meet the needs of their children. So I think there's a genuine desire to know more and to be able to do well by their children.
Yeah. 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 Okay. There's one thing I don't want to let you go before I ask you this question, and I'm going to ask it for the benefit of the group, which is, should parents sign the IEP at the meeting?
That's a great question. And in fact, different jurisdictions have different rules about that. So in DC, there's no longer, and there hasn't been for a number of years now, a signature line for parents to sign. So basically, yeah, I see you've got this expression on your face, like, what?
Yeah, I am like, what? I had no idea. I thought I was asking you, anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, it used to be that parents would sign at the bottom of the IEP, but now parents give consent to the very first IEP to be initiated. And once they've agreed to that, there's no longer anything to say you have to agree and consent to this IEP. So they can revoke consent. And certainly at those meetings, they can advocate for what they want in the IEP, but there's no hit the pause button. I'm not agreeing to this IEP.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So the idea, you know, in DC, that should parents sign or not sign, that's not even really on the table once they've agreed to the very first IEP that their child ever has.
Interesting.
Now, they can, of course, lodge complaints if they think that the IEP is inadequate and is not providing a free and appropriate public education to their child, but it is a different process. So in
Wow.
other
Okay.
words, yeah.
Can I interrupt you for just a second? So there is an annual review, yes?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
And at that annual review, can parents propose changes?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And they
Okay.
should. So parents are entitled to at least an annual review and can request meetings far more often. So, and I encourage parents to request meetings if they feel like the IEP isn't meeting their child's needs or they don't see their child making adequate progress. Don't wait for that full year to elapse. Like, meet when you need to meet. And absolutely, the parent can and should advocate for the changes that they think are necessary at that meeting. And I think, again, most schools try to be responsive to that. I don't think that the majority of schools, at least I like to believe, are just pushing through when a parent has said, I really think this is necessary. But of course, we know there are times where schools and families don't see eye to eye. And so then, parents need to make a decision about what to do if the school is refusing to do
Mhm.
the things that the parent thinks are necessary. Hopefully, they can come to an agreement as to what's going to make the best IEP. Parents also can request evaluations. They don't need to wait 3 full years between evaluations if they think something significant has changed in their child's life, or they think there's something else going on and they want more information. So parents do definitely have a number of rights. In jurisdictions that do have that parent signature, I think it really depends. If parents are feeling uneasy, if they feel like they've been pushed to agree to things that they don't really agree with, or they want more time to reflect, there is absolutely nothing wrong with saying, I need more time to reflect. I need to think about this. And then if they do have questions, they can always bring in someone to look at it and make sure, is this really meeting my child's needs?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, there's so much more to talk about. We're going to leave it there for now, but we will do another one sometime because
Great.
this was really fun. Thank you for coming.
Absolutely. It's been great talking with you.
You as well.